Hi, welcome everybody. This is the Wisconsin Conservation Voters budget training. We are just going to take a minute or two and let other folks kind of trickle in, since that seems to be how Zoom works. But in the immediate, I'll just let you know that we will be taking questions. So if you have those, you just want to put them in the chat. And we'll try to get to that, make sure we get to them all before end. And then we definitely have some to-do items and some materials for you. So we'll make sure you get all of that. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope you had a great water week and learned a lot and made some really great connections. I know that this is a really important event and week, and I'm just sorry that it couldn't be in person because I know how much fun it is to catch up with folks. My name is Jennifer Giegerich. I am the Government Affairs Director for Wisconsin Conservation Voters, and I'm based here in Madison. And Casey Hicks is our Northeast organizer based in Green Bay. And what we're going to do today is just kind of walk through a little bit of what is the budget process in Wisconsin, where are we in it, and then walk through some of the key water initiatives that are in it. And then Casey's going to give you some really good tips and opportunities for how you can advocate for those, especially in this kind of virtual, still COVID environment that we are living in. So we're just going to ask everyone to be on mute. And then if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we will get to them as we go. So with that, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through how to advocate for water in the Wisconsin state budget. So why don't we go to the next slide? So what is the budget process? So the cool thing about you can flip it. So the state budget is one of the best opportunities we have to advocate for our priorities and our values. And it is probably the biggest policy document that the state of Wisconsin produces every 2 years. And the basic, the process with this is that the governor will introduce a budget kind of at the beginning of a 2-year budget cycle. It starts in February. And the governor's budget this year, when he did his budget address, it was really, really great because they were able to use a lot of the citizens who had spoke at listening sessions about why they cared about specific things in the budget. And I don't know if you got a chance to see the governor's budget address to the legislature, but it's a really good opportunity to see how people sharing their stories about why specific items in the budget would be important to them and to their communities in really personal terms is kind of how the governor framed his budget this time. And so in case he's going to go through some of those, how to be effective, just know that Governor Evers did that very same thing to kind of open up his budget. But the next part of the process is where we are right now. So if we could, yeah, go back. So then the governor introduces his budget and then he sends it to the legislature. And the Joint Finance Committee has 8 members of the Assembly, 8 members of the Senate, and 6 members of those 8 in each house are from the majority party and 2 are from the minority party. So right now on Joint Finance, the Republicans control the majority of that committee. And that's only relevant is just when they are of the same party as the governor, it tends to be a very smooth process. When it's split, when the chambers are split, it's a very kind of chaotic process because they're negotiating among themselves. But in this case, the Republicans being a different party than the governor, it's the legislature kind of working to take what the governor has introduced and decide how they're going to do it. And so this time around, we expect that the governor will, or that the Joint Finance Committee will be taking a look at the governor's budget, and they can decide to take his budget and work from there and kind of amend it, starting from his point. Or the legislature can take, the Joint Finance Committee will decide to start what's called from a base budget. And that basically means they throw out the governor's budget and they start from just kind of the bare bones of what it takes to just keep the lights on in government, if you will. And then they add back in things that they want to adopt. From everything we've heard, it sounds like the Joint Finance Committee will probably be starting from a base budget, but we're hopeful that they will take a set of the recommendations that the governor has made. So it doesn't mean that they're out completely, but now they got to be voted to get back into the budget. The Joint Finance Committee will usually hold hearings this year, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but they will be in April. There are 3 in person, and then they're going to have 1 virtual hearing where people can testify over video. And after that happens, they come back and they start adding things to the budget or taking things out, and then they negotiate amongst themselves on joint finance. The Joint Finance Committee will then pass their version of the budget, and then it goes to both the Senate and the Assembly. So one house will have it first. If they make any changes, the other chamber has to agree to those changes. If they make any changes, it's got to go back, but basically the same budget has to pass both places. It then goes to the governor for his signature. And with the budget, there can be a lot of vetoes. The governor in Wisconsin has a lot of power to kind of change what the budget is, sign it, but pass it by just like striking out certain parts of the budget. So then the legislature would decide if they want to override any of those vetoes. It's 2/3 of both houses to do that. It's extremely rare that that ever happens. So most of the time, once the governor signs it with his vetoes, that's usually the end of the budget process. And traditionally, that's supposed to be done by June 30th. Our fiscal year in the state of Wisconsin starts on July 1st. However, due to a whole set of situations, both dealing with COVID, dealing with the fact that there's a lot of federal stimulus money, with a lot of money coming back to government, to state and local governments that needs to get figured out. There's a lot of new members of joint finance. We've got a new Senate majority leader. So there's the politics of all of it is still kind of getting hashed out. So the general understanding at this kind of at the gossip level is that this will probably take us longer to get adopted than usual. We're already, the fact that the joint finance hearings are in April already means we're about a month behind where we traditionally are. All right, so that's kind of the process. So now let's talk about what's actually in it to be excited about. So like I said, the governor's budget is really a great vision of our values of the state of Wisconsin. And one of the things that, citizens from around the state have talked a lot about is the fact that we have a serious drinking water crisis in the state of Wisconsin. And the fact that most of our drinking water in the state comes from our groundwater, there's a lot of issues with land practices, a lot manure management, PFAS, all kinds of things that are tied to how we use our water. So the fact that the governor made several really key water priorities is really a reflection of the fact that citizens and voters around the state made those huge priorities. So let's walk through what some of those are. So one of the biggest things that the governor had in his budget was a big commitment to protecting our health from PFAS. So PFAS is an emerging contaminant that it's basically a collection of 3,000 different human main chemicals. It deals with firefighting foam and in any kind of water proof efforts. So this has been a huge issue across the country that states are grappling with. The federal government has not yet set standards for these, so a lot of states were moving forward with it. And here in Wisconsin, we have a number of communities from La Crosse to Rhinelander to Marinette and Peshtigo, Milwaukee and Dane County, just some of the bigger examples of where this has been found in the drinking water and in our groundwater. So the governor's office did, or governor's budget did some pretty big and bold things. First of all, his budget would help to implement the PFAS action plan. So there was about, last year, there was a year's worth of input from citizen groups and scientists and local governments and activists and citizens making a set of recommendations for how we should get on top of this PFAS crisis. So this, to implement this plan, they would have close to $25 million for state and local testing and remediation of PFAS wherever it's found, and 11 new DNR staff to really get on top of where are we finding it and how do we set health-based standards and wildlife-based standards and air, land, and surface water, drinking water, and groundwater. And then the most exciting thing, I think, for anybody who was involved in the legislature last year, one of our top priorities was passing the CLEAR Act, which would have been the strongest set of regulations around PFAS in the country. And it was looking to set these health-based standards in anywhere you found PFAS, so land, waste, air, and all the water sources. So the fact that they're actually fast tracking a process for setting up those standards is really important. So that was one of the biggest and boldest things that the governor put in, and that was directly because of a lot of the work that local water groups around the state were doing. So the next place in the governor's budget is agriculture pollution. So I think a lot of folks know that last year was the year of the Speaker's Water Quality Task Force. The governor had declared 2019, the beginning of the session, as the year of safe drinking water. A lot of this was driven by more and more people across the state of Wisconsin turning on their tap and not knowing it was safe to drink. And so traditionally this has been kind of in the northeast part of the state, but as you look at this map, you can see there are a lot of communities in the state of Wisconsin where nitrate levels are really high. And that it can have a huge problem for babies, particularly causing blue baby syndrome, but it can also cause a whole host of other health issues in our state. So the governor's budget actually took a lot of the recommendations that came out of the Speaker's Water Quality Task Force, one of which was funding for the county conservation staff. So the county conservation staff are really the boots on the ground in each county to help farmers develop plans that implement good manure management practices. One of the other things that this budget did that is really exciting is that in the state of Wisconsin, the number of CAFOs in our state, so the large industrial farms, has grown exponentially, but the number of staff that we had to monitor them to make sure that they are complying with water quality rules has not increased. And in fact, there was a state audit that was done a couple years ago, and it found that the DNR was dramatically underfunding the ability or understaffing the ability to monitor CAFOs, and that was leading to higher levels of non-compliance with the Clean Water Act. So for the first time, it would bring Wisconsin up to where other Midwestern states are for having CAFOs pay for the staff needed to regulate them. So it increases the annual fee for CAFOs from $345 to $545. But more importantly, it with their permit, they have to pay $3,270 for a permit, whereas right now they only pay a couple hundred. So this really goes to help making sure that CAFOs are in compliance with clean water laws. Another big part of the agriculture pollution problem is making sure there's money in the targeted runoff management program. So that is making sure that we are developing plans that keep manure on the land and not running off into surface waters. And then finally, because of all this impact of agriculture pollution around our state, a lot of people, private wells get contaminated. And in the state of Wisconsin, if you have a private well, so you're not on a municipal water system, you're responsible for testing your well and knowing it's safe. And then if there is a pollution problem, you're responsible for either getting that well dug deeper, or replacing your water source, or getting filters put on. So this, and unfortunately right now, state law has it so that you only qualify if that well is also used for agricultural livestock. So this would increase money to the fund, but also make sure that families and people are protected when they can't drink their water. So that is a huge part of this budget too. The next big area of water in the governor's budget is dealing with lead. So lead is one of the issues that we're very concerned about statewide. It often gets talked about like it is only in a couple of larger cities in our state, but as you can see from this map, there are just about 2/3 of our communities or counties have a lead issue, and lead is one of those things where it's damaging to children under the age of 3, and they often get exposed to that in their home environment where they spend most of their time. And while it is a serious issue for child development, the good news is it is actually one of the easiest problems to solve, in that we just need to remove lead pipes and lead fixtures from those buildings where children are. So we know what to do, but the hard part of it politically is that it's expensive. So it's really important for there to be investments by the state in helping local communities remove lead service lines. So Governor Evers' budget puts in $40 million for lead service line replacement. And then I'm hopeful, this is more the federal budget, but we're hopeful that there'll be more money coming down to deal with this, because it does get expensive. But then also as part of this effort, expanding access to the Birth to 3 program, which is where children are tested for lead, and making sure that parents, if they do find their kids have lead, high lead levels, that they are given treatment and alternative bottled water sources. So that's a really important part of the governor's budget on water. And then the last big area that we wanted to talk about as far as water in the budget is dealing with climate change resiliency. So I think most of us know that climate change is one of the most, if not the most pressing problem facing our planet and the survival of our planet. But the reality is that it doesn't, that we have a short amount of time to really get on top of this and making sure that we are protecting people and getting in place some serious carbon reductions. We also know that the impacts of climate change don't affect everybody equally. And so one of the things that the governor's budget does is really look at how do we, there's a whole bunch of ways where we're reducing our carbon pollution, but then there is a whole section on this that deals with how do we help Wisconsin communities deal with the impact of climate change in their communities. So one of the most exciting things that the governor's budget does is it creates the Office of Environmental Justice. and it would be at the Department of Administration. And what this office would do is to work with, it would have a chief resiliency officer within this office that would work with local communities, tribal communities, and the state government to really assess climate risk. So making sure that the flooding issues are addressed, the fact that there are public health impacts that are built into climate change pollution, and helping communities come up with plans that help mitigate that. And then also providing money to make sure that they have comprehensive plans to address that. So this is a picture of the Bad River Reservation a couple of years ago, when it flooded out, basically because they had a historic 100-year rain event where the rains just come so hard and so fast, the land just can't absorb it. And like this is happening more and more in communities around the state of Wisconsin. So how do we get ahead of that? The governor's budget also has $30 million that goes towards flooding initiatives. And a lot of this is figuring out, how do we not, how do we not build in floodplains? How do we make sure that we've got money for dam removal and repair where we need it, so that we are making sure that we are not exposing communities to unfair, as one of the chief impacts of climate change, but clearly not the only one in the state of Wisconsin. So there are some others, and Casey put a link in the chat to a budget memo that we did, just kind of overviewing some of the higher level things. And there are some other water issues that are in that budget, along with some energy and climate change ones. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey to talk about how you can advocate for these things in the budget.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, to introduce myself again, I'm the Northeast organizer with Wisconsin Conservation Voters. So I'm based up in Green Bay. And also I just want to give another quick reminder that if you do have questions, make sure to put them in the chat so that we can answer them later at the end of the presentation. But as Jen explained, there's a lot of really great and important budget items this year in the governor's proposed budget that we're really excited about. And we know that other people are really excited about. So we really want to make sure that people are getting out there, sharing their story and their experiences, and why these budget items are going to be important to them, and solving some of these issues across the state that we've been dealing with for years. And one of the best ways to do that is to convey your story to a legislator so that they can know personally how an issue is affecting you. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit on how stories are typically put together and how you can form a narrative that's true to you and that's compelling, and just some general tips and practices. And then we'll also talk about some of the ways that you can actually go about sharing your story, especially in this virtual environment where things are a little bit more challenging, but there are also plenty of opportunities to share your story in creative ways. And then hopefully at the end of this, we should, again, have time for questions, or if folks even want to stick on for a little bit and try to practice their story or testimony, or pick our brains a little bit, you're more than welcome to. But I want to start off by saying that you may think that you don't have a compelling story, but everyone does. It just requires a little bit of introspection and thought about how to convey it and what exactly it is. And I also want to say at the top of this, water issues, especially drinking water issues, can be highly personal, especially if it has to do with health or anything else having to do with your drinking water. It's a personal thing. So it doesn't have to be you sharing every single secret or thing that has affected you, but it's what you're comfortable sharing in your public life, and a testimony that you might be sharing at an upcoming hearing or with a legislator through your story. And they all have basic tenets in them as far as sharing why and how you came to hold your values of caring about clean drinking water or surface water or climate change, or any of the other budget items or issues that we just talked about. So that's how you actually convey the shared values that we all have, hopefully, right, about caring about having access to safe drinking water. The other parts of stories are they allow you to really put that person that you're conveying that story to in the place and the environment that you were in when it first affected you, or you first found out about it, or really started to care about an issue. And you can convey that imagery that really makes them feel like they're in your shoes. And that's much, much more powerful than just sharing data or facts. So as you're thinking about how to convey that, think about those types of imagery and choice moments on when you came to hold the values that you have now, or really came to care about the issues that are important to you now. So let me just say first, don't make yourself a number in your testimony. Legislators really do want to hear how a budget item or a bill is going to affect you personally. And if you go in talking generally about stats or numbers in a very broad way, you're not really personalizing it or sharing those values that you want to get across to that legislator, that decision maker, that they can empathize with and base a decision on. So looking at this pie chart as you're thinking about your testimony and sharing your story, really try to reserve facts and data as supplements to your personal experience, and think about it as an 80-20 type of split, where 80% of it is your personal story, your experience, the 20% of it is facts and data to back up your lived experience. So just don't make yourself a number because you're not. You're a human being who's going through or cares about an issue that's really important. So stories are the most classic and mutually understood way to convey information amongst people, right? We take in information really, really well through stories and remember them, and they all have key elements that make them up. First and foremost is having a character that you empathize with. They have shared morals, values, experiences that maybe we've had or we can at least understand. And in your testimony, in your story, that character may be you. It may be a neighbor or a friend that you know, who maybe you're speaking on behalf of or with. And you're conveying what the morals are of yourself or that person, and you're explaining them. I really care about drinking water and contaminants in drinking water specifically because I know people who have had health issues as a result of having PFAS in drinking water or nitrates in their drinking water. And those people matter to me, and that's why this issue matters to me. That's an example of that. The next part of it is having that challenge, which is the issue that you're facing or that your community is facing when it comes to water. Or to any other issue that you might care about. It could be PFAS, it could be lead, nitrates, or something that we didn't mention earlier in the presentation, but it's something that's presenting that challenge to your values and even maybe how you're living your everyday life. The next part of the story is having that choice that comes as a result of that challenge. And that may be something that you want to convey in your testimony, where you found out about your water being contaminated, or the creek behind your house or your neighbor's house, you found out that it was contaminated, and that presented a choice for you to come and speak before the Joint Finance Committee hearing at one of their virtual hearings, or why you're contacting your legislator in the first place. And so the next part of it is describing what the outcome and the need is from that legislator, and having a direct call to action for them in a very direct ask that's not passive. So after you've explained what your story is, what your experience is, saying, I'm counting on you, can I count on you to please support budget item A, B, or C? Can I count on you to ensure that county conservationists are going to be fully funded going forward in this budget? And so just being very direct, having that ask that leaves very little room for a no and a lot of room for a yes, and very or no room for any kind of dance around that type of answer, so you can get a direct response. Um, we'll make sure to put in there into the chats a document that details how to have an effective lobby meeting and how to make that type of ask. And it just kind of rounds out a little bit more how you would use your personal story or testimony in an application like lobbying a legislator. So I mentioned at the top that there's unfortunately challenges to conveying our stories in a virtual environment, but there's also a lot of opportunities to do things differently and creatively than we have in the past. So I want to highlight Kayla Furton, who is a resident in the town of Peshtigo, where they have been dealing with PFAS contamination for several years now. And for knowing that we're having their private wells contaminated by a private corporation that wasn't disclosing PFAS contamination. And so Kayla has been a really great example of how to share your story. She's gone to media, she's gone to meetings with legislators, and she's detailed exactly how PFAS contamination has affected her and her family through their health, through their safety and well-being, and just even the trust that they have in the state government and local government and the corporation in their town and just their water that they rely on. In a couple slides here, I'll show you another example of what a story actually looks like. But how you can actually share your story can come in the form of delivered testimony if you plan to go to one of the Joint Finance Committee hearings coming up, and we'll list those out in the next couple slides too, so you know the dates and how to sign up for them. It could be through email, and you could even get creative. Besides just writing down your story, you could include pictures, videos, things that personalize or show imagery for what you may be experiencing or what you care about. Of course, having a lobby meeting, and that's something that we're always happy to help out with in you preparing for or even setting up that type of lobby meeting. Video, I think, is the most exciting and opportunistic thing that we can do right now in this virtual space. And there's a lot of different creative things that you can do to convey the issue that you're facing or that your community may be facing in video, such as touring your home, your neighborhood, maybe even turning on your tap if you do have contaminated water and showing people what it actually looks like. Gathering your neighbors and community members together for all one big video to share what your experiences have been so that you have that power in numbers. Or maybe you're not going through a specific issue, but you know someone who is, then you want to advocate for them. You could even sit down and do an interview with them. But that is not an exhaustive list by any means. There are a lot of different things that you could do. I'm sure there are things that we haven't even thought of, that you may be a really creative person and there's a different way that you're thinking about how you could advocate for the budget items and issues that are important to you in a different way. So who can you actually share your story with? The most obvious and pertinent one right now with the budget hearing are legislators, both on the Joint Finance Committee, but also your personal state reps and state senators who can advocate for you through their caucus or through committees, and talk to their colleagues and let them know that they have constituents who are being affected and could have their challenges met and fixed by passing, or at least started to be fixed by passing this budget with these budget items that we detailed out in them. Sharing your story with the governor, because this is his proposed budget. He can use that as a way to show that this matters to people and that the items he put in there are in there for a reason, because they would help to solve drinking water and surface water and groundwater issues across the state in a real tangible way. We've mentioned Joint Finance Committee members quite a bit already. The media is another really great way to share out your story as well, especially if you don't feel like it's being talked about enough that's facing your community. reaching out to your local newspaper or statewide paper to really get that information out there is going to be a beneficial way as well. And we're also happy to help you craft your story and to share it out. We can do it in a lot of different ways, including the ways that we just mentioned. So Jen, being in the Capitol, can share that out with legislators and let them know that we've had people contacting us who care about it, who are going through these issues. We're able to convey that to media too, or if you're comfortable with it, we can even share it on our website so that people can refer back to it in that space as well. But we're here to help you craft that and disseminate it and get the word out as well. So I mentioned I was going to show an example of what a story would look like. And for some context, Cindy Boyle lives in the town of Peshtigo. She did give us permission to make this video with her back in August. And in it, she's talking about how PFAS contamination has affected her and her family. And so you'll see the central points that I mentioned earlier that make up a story. She talks about her character, which is herself, and describes what her morals and values are. She goes a little bit into like her childhood to set that up. She talks about the first time she found out about PFAS and how it made her feel. And she goes into some more detail as well. I will say right away that this was for a different application. It was for an election. So it's a different type of ask, but she does have a direct ask at the end. In this case, I was asking for people to vote for a certain candidate, but obviously in your case, going to a testimony or asking for a budget item, it's going to be to support that budget item. Let's see if it works this way.
About 3 years ago, we found out that our
People hear that?
community, Marinette and the town of Peshtigo, had a severe PFAS contamination issue in drinking water. And our home is the first property in the town of Peshtigo that abuts the city of Marinette, meaning we're on wells for our drinking water. So you start to pay attention very quickly when you realize that your water can be contaminated and your family could and very likely has been drinking poisoned water for a long time. The first thing that you think about are the health concerns, and PFAS has been linked to numerous health risks, everything from liver and kidneys to testicular cancer to thyroid disease to childhood development delays. I know that my thyroid was taken out in my mid-30s and it's directly linked to thyroid disease. I can't help but feel that there's a connection because my mother had kidney cancer, my dad had a brain tumor, my sister has thyroid disease, and I had my thyroid fully removed. And we'd been drinking, water right out of the spring-fed pond my entire childhood. So we hold our breath now because I watch our adult sons grow up and it alarms me. I worry about them, especially with respect to potential, testicular cancer issues. And we just watch holding our breath all the time. And I'm going to vote for Jonathan.
I'm muted. So that's a really great example of how you can share your story and a really great local example. I also just want to recommend that if you're on Facebook to follow Save Our Water on Facebook, SOH2O. They've been doing a lot of great work around PFAS contamination in Wisconsin and are a really great resource to learn about it. I'm just going to get back to my slide here. So upcoming hearings are going to be happening, and unfortunately there's only one virtual hearing. So there are going to be 3 in-person hearings, all of them from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. across different parts of the states. Friday, April 9th, UW-Whitewater, Wednesday, April 21st, the Hodag Dome in Rhinelander, Thursday, April 22nd at UW Stout in Menominee. There's only one virtual hearing scheduled right now. The registration information, at least unless something changed from last night, I haven't seen any of that put out. But once it is, we can get back to everyone who signed up for this and let you know how to sign up for that. With COVID and safety concerns, we really want to make sure that folks are staying conscious of that and staying safe, and just making sure that we're not spreading it. So if you can't make any of these meetings, it you're not being blocked out from still sharing your input. There is a web page from the Wisconsin State Legislature to go and share your budget comments. It's linked below. That's something that we can also share out with folks as well. There's also an email that's meant specifically for sharing out testimony. You can use that as well. The website has a fillable form. So it's really whatever medium you want to send that through.